Sheriff Jake Thompson had just settled into his recliner, a steaming cup of coffee in one hand and the TV remote in the other, when sharp, aggressive knocking shattered his peaceful morning. He wasn't expecting visitors, especially not the kind who pounded like they were trying to break in. With a sigh, he set his coffee down and walked to the door. The sight that greeted him nearly made him laugh out loud. 3 men stood on his porch in ill-fitting uniforms, their chests puffed out like they were about to raid a drug den. The tallest, a middle-aged guy with a thick mustache and mirrored sunglasses, stepped forward, flashing a badge that looked more like a cheap souvenir than anything official. "Sir," the mustache man announced in a deep, theatrical voice, "we need you to step outside immediately." Jake raised an eyebrow, crossed his arms over his chest. "And you might be?" "We're with the HOA enforcement unit." The man's 2 lackeys nodded seriously behind him. "You violated multiple neighborhood ordinances, and we're here to bring you in." Jake stared at them, debating whether they were joking or just incredibly stupid. "The HOA has an enforcement unit now." "We do," the mustache man said, lifting his chin. "And we don't tolerate noncompliance." Jake bit back a smirk. His HOA had always been a little overzealous, but this was next-level nonsense. The mustache man reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, dramatically flipping it open. "You have been cited for an unapproved mailbox design," he declared, voice brimming with artificial authority, "and unauthorized lawn furniture." Jake blinked. "My mailbox?" He glanced at the standard black box at the edge of his driveway. "What's wrong with it?" "It doesn't conform to the HOA's latest aesthetic guidelines." One of the lackeys chimed in, consulting his clipboard like he was reading scripture. "Section 4, subsection B, line 12. And my lawn furniture?" Jake motioned to his porch, where 2 perfectly normal Adirondack chairs sat untouched. The mustache man hesitated, glancing at his clipboard. "It's unapproved." Jake exhaled slowly. "So let me get this straight. You're trying to arrest me over a mailbox and patio chairs?" "This isn't a joke," the mustache man snapped, stepping forward. "Noncompliance with HOA ordinances is a serious matter. You're coming with us." Jake folded his arms. "And where exactly are you planning to take me?" The man squared his shoulders. "To our holding facility." Jake couldn't hold back his laughter. "The HOA has a jail?" "It's not a jail," the mustache man bristled. "It's a compliance center." Jake rubbed his jaw, pretending to consider it. "Well, gentlemen, I hate to break it to you, but I'm a little busy today, so I'll have to decline your invitation." The mustache man's patience snapped. "That's it," he barked. "Turn around and put your hands behind your back." Jake didn't move. "Or what?" One of the lackeys stepped up, pulling out a cheap pair of handcuffs that looked like they'd break if you sneezed too hard. "Do it now, sir, or we'll be forced to take action." Jake sighed and reached down, not for a weapon, but for the small radio clipped to his belt. With a quick press of a button, he sent out a silent distress signal to his deputies, all without breaking eye contact with the so-called officers. The mustache man grinned, clearly thinking he'd won. "That's right," he said smugly. "You're learning your place." Jake held back another chuckle. "Oh, I know my place." The second the lackey reached forward to slap the flimsy cuffs on him, Jake moved. In one swift motion, he grabbed the man's wrist, twisted it behind his back, and spun him toward the nearest car. The man yelped as his face smacked against the hood. The mustache man staggered back. "Hey, what the hell do you think you're doing?" Jake glanced at him, still holding the struggling man in place. "Performing a citizen's arrest." The second lackey reached for something on his belt, probably a fake citation book, but he froze as the sound of approaching sirens filled the air. Within seconds, real police vehicles skidded to a stop, lights flashing. The fake officers looked like deer caught in headlights. Jake leaned in close to the man he had pinned. "Now, let's talk about who's really under arrest." By the time Deputy Carter stepped out of his squad car, one hand resting on his duty belt, the mustache man and his 2 lackeys had gone stiff with fear. Carter took in the scene, Jake holding a man pinned against a car, the other 2 standing frozen in place, and raised an eyebrow. "Boss, You mind telling me why you're wrestling with a guy wearing what looks like a Halloween police costume? Jake finally let the squirming man go, stepping back and brushing his hands off. These three gentlemen were in the middle of conducting an unlawful arrest. Figured I'd save him the trouble of doing it the hard way. Carter let out a low whistle and turned to the trio. All right, let's see some IDs. The mustached man tried to regain his composure, straightening his cheap polyester uniform. There's been a misunderstanding. We're authorized HOA enforcement officers. Carter stared at him for a moment, then slowly reached out and plucked the man's shiny badge from his chest. He turned it over, examining the poorly engraved letters. HOA compliance officer. He looked back at Jake. This is a joke, right? Jake smirked. I wish. From there, it only got worse for the so-called officers. A search of their vehicle turned up fake citation books, fine notices, and, just as Jake suspected, a cash box full of payments they had strong-armed out of homeowners. As the fake cops were cuffed and read their rights, the mustached man tried one last desperate plea. You can't arrest us for enforcing community rules. Jake gave him a dry look. Watch me. And just like that, the entire neighborhood erupted into cheers. What followed was one of the most satisfying days of Jake's career. By the end of it, not only were the fake officers behind bars, but the entire HOA board was under investigation for fraud. Word spread fast, and by nightfall, the neighborhood had turned into an impromptu celebration. Beer bottles clinking, laughter echoing through the streets. Deputy Carter wandered over, shaking his head. This might be the first time I've seen a sheriff's investigation turn into a community festival. Jake took a sip of his beer. People love seeing justice served. Carter smirked. Well, you're going to love this. Just got word from prosecutor's office. They're looking into felony fraud charges against the HOA board. Jake grinned. Now that's music to my ears.